I never thought I'd be the kind of man who pulled a trigger in his own backyard, but that's exactly what happened. One second I was yelling warnings, the next, a gunshot split the night, and the HOA president was screaming on the grass with a shattered leg. All because I refused to hand over my home to people who thought they owned the neighborhood. That's how far it went, and that's how I found out what real tyranny looks like when it's dressed up as community service. My name is David Johnson. When my wife Anna and I first moved into Sunny Ridge Estates with our two boys, Lucas and Mateo, it felt like the perfect suburbia package. A neat little cul-de-sac, polite waves at the mailbox, and a homeowners association that in theory kept things clean and orderly. I thought HOA fees were just another line on the credit card, nothing more than paint color guidelines and holiday decoration notices. I was wrong. The first few letters I got seemed silly. One about the grass being an inch too long, another about our mailbox paint being non-compliant. I laughed them off. But the laughter stopped the morning a tow truck rolled up and tried to haul off my old car. It wasn't junk. It wasn't abandoned. It was just beat up from years of commuting and moving. And yet two men in uniforms hooked it up like it was scrap metal. I called the police thinking the law would side with me. Instead, the officer shrugged, told me the HOA had called it in under city code, and suggested we all calm down. My car came back later after paperwork and apologies, but the damage was done. I'd been marked. I was now the guy who complained, the guy who didn't bend. And in Sunny Ridge, that made me a target. The real storm hit on a humid July night when the power went out across the neighborhood. Transformers blew roofs, rattled the streets, went dark, except for my house. I had a generator, a leftover purchase from my military deployment days. That humming little machine turned our place into a glowing beacon on a street of shadows. And people notice beacons. A few days later, my elderly neighbors Evelyn and Roberto knocked on the door. Their house had a tree through the living room, their fridge was dead, and Evelyn's insulin was warming. They were proud people stooped by years, but still full of dignity, and asking for help wasn't easy for them. I didn't hesitate. I gave them the spare room, the fridge space, and a bit of normalcy. It felt good to do the right thing. But word travels fast in neighborhoods, and it didn't take long before Martha Hargrove, the HOA president, came marching up my porch in her pink cardigan pearls, gleaming like a badge of office clipboard in hand. She didn't ask. She demanded. "We'll be holding an emergency HOA meeting here tonight," she said flatly, as if it were already decided. My family, according to her, could just move over to Roberto and Evelyn's wrecked house for the evening. I laughed in disbelief. "This is my home," I told her. "You're not turning it into your boardroom." She smiled in that fake way, lips curving but eyes like ice, and she warned me there would be consequences. From that moment on, the harassment doubled. Another tow truck showed up at dawn, neighbors started whispering, and someone spray-painted violator in red across my garage. Every little move was calculated to wear me down. I tried to fight back the right way. I filed petitions, walked door to door with a clipboard, tried to explain to my neighbors that the HOA was overstepping. At first I got a few sympathetic nods, even a couple signatures. But then Martha twisted the story. She told people I was dangerous, unstable, a threat to the community. Slowly, doors closed in my face. People crossed the street to avoid me. One night I sat on the porch, the failed petition crumpled in my hands, and I wondered if maybe they were right. Maybe I was the fool picking fights I couldn't win. Anna looked at me with tired eyes and asked if it was worth it, if maybe we should just move. And for the first time I wanted to say yes. I wanted to run, to leave Sunny Ridge behind and pretend none of it ever happened. That's when Roberto put a weathered hand on my shoulder. He'd been quiet for days, watching, listening. Finally, he told me the truth. He wasn't just a retired construction worker. He was Detective Alvarez, 30 years on the force. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Don't let them win by fear. Pick your ground, and when they cross it, you stand firm." It was the first spark of hope I'd felt in weeks. I started documenting everything, setting up cameras around the house. And sure enough, the night came when Martha showed up again, not with a clipboard this time, but with a baseball bat in her hands and two board members carrying crowbars. I caught them on the cameras creeping through the dark like burglars. I told Anna to lock the boys in the bedroom. My gut twisted because this wasn't petty harassment anymore. This was intimidation with weapons. "Open up, Johnson," she shouted from the backyard fence. "The community has decided. Your house will host the meeting with or without your consent." I stepped out with a flashlight hand on my holster. My voice shook, but I held the line. "You're trespassing. Leave now." Her eyes glittered. "You forget your family lives here. How safe do you think they'll be if you keep pushing us?" Then she raised the bat toward the sliding glass door where my wife and kids stood watching. Something snapped inside me. Fear turned to fury, and I gripped the gun tighter. "Threaten them again," I growled, "and you'll regret it." That night ended without bloodshed, but it was only a test. The very next day, notices plastered my garage declaring I was non-compliant and subject to eviction. It was pure theater, a show of dominance. Neighbors gathered on corners whispering. Some looked at me with pity, others with fear. And through it all, Martha strutted like she already owned the block. Marcus, a young dad down the street, came to me quietly one night. He was pale eyes darting around like a man betraying a cult. "She's planning something big," he whispered. "Tomorrow. If you don't hand over the house, the board will remove you themselves." That was it. I couldn't hide anymore. The next day I walked straight to the gathering at Martha's driveway petition in one hand, printout of state property code in the other. In front of dozens of neighbors, I read the law aloud. The HOA has no authority to enter private residences. None. If anyone steps on my property without consent, it's trespassing. If they threaten my family, it's assault. For a moment there was silence. I saw doubt flicker in a few faces. But Martha barked back, voice shrill, "Don't listen to him. He's unstable. He wants to destroy this community." I felt the heat rise in me. "Protects them," I shouted. "You fined Denise for the color of her curtains. You threatened Joy with foreclosure over her porch furniture. You tried to tow my car. That's not protection, that's tyranny in a cardigan." Gasps, murmurs, nervous chuckles. Martha's face burned crimson. She lunged at me with her clipboard, but before she could touch me, Roberto stepped between us like lightning. His voice was steel. "Back off, Martha. You just crossed into assault." For the first time she faltered, and for the first time the crowd saw her mask slip. But tyrants don't forgive humiliation. That night, just past midnight, they came again. The cameras picked up a group marching down the street, flashlights cutting through the dark. Martha at the front, pink cardigan, glowing faintly, baseball bat in her hands. Behind her, 2 board members with crowbars. This wasn't a bluff. Anna called 911, voice shaking, but I knew the cops wouldn't make it in time. I grabbed the flashlight, stepped into the backyard, and faced them. "Open the gate," Martha shouted. "Your home belongs to this community, not to you." "You're trespassing," I said firmly. "Leave now." She sneered. "Not until you learn your place." Then she did it. She raised the bat, not at me, but at the glass door behind me where my wife and kids stood frozen. My blood turned to fire. I pulled the gun, my voice echoing through the night. "Drop it. Now." For a split second everything froze. The neighbors watching from shadows held their breath. Even the crickets went silent. Then Martha lunged. The gunshot cracked like thunder echoing through Sunny Ridge. She collapsed to the grass, screaming, the bat rolling from her hands. Chaos erupted. Board members bolted, flashlights scattered, and the so-called army of the HOA broke into panicked retreat. I stood there trembling, the barrel still smoking, while Anna rushed to pull the boys away from the window. Roberto put a steady hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Safety on." I clicked it, lowered the gun, and waited for the sirens. Minutes later the police swarmed the street. Martha wailed dramatically, accusing me of attempted murder. But I stayed calm. "It's all on camera," I said. And it was. Footage, witnesses, everything. Roberto, retired detective, backed me up with quiet authority. The officers reviewed the footage, saw Martha trespassing with a weapon, saw me holding fire until the last possible second. They uncuffed me, cuffed her, and rolled her into an ambulance. She wasn't dead, but she was done. Her reign of fear collapsed with that single night. And that's where my story ends. Not with celebration, not with relief, but with the echo of a gunshot that still rings in my ears. Because here's the truth. Sometimes standing your ground means crossing a line you never wanted to cross. And once you do, nothing is ever the same again. Lesson: fear only wins when you let it.